Hi all, let's have a look at another fascinating game from the TCEC Season 17 Premier Division. So this is in round 29. Leela was playing against Stoofvlees, so battle of the neural networks. Let's have a look at this game. So the first 8 moves: e4, c5, a Sicilian defense, and we go into the Scheveningen variation. So a6 I consider a major upgrade to this. This allows the dreaded Keres attack after Paul Keres, one of the greatest Estonian chess players who had his face on even currency and notes and stuff. A highly celebrated sportsman in his own right. So we have h6. By the way, a little bit of trivia. Keres also played a lot of correspondence chess. So, and if you want to play correspondence chess, Kingscrusher TV, and I'll invite you for a game. He was a big correspondence player early in his career. So anyway, we have Leela playing here. So h6 is one of the safest routes, so not allowing g5. Knight c6 has been played before, but h6 I believe is considered like the safest approach here for black if you are going to play this position. We have h4. And now a really committal decision. This is the move that kind of surprises me. e5. It kind of gives a gaping strategic hole on d5. It makes it a kind of version, a bad version, I would say, of the Sicilian Sveshnikov in a way, because these knights are ready to control key squares without hopping around. In a mainline Sveshnikov, the knight would have come like this to b5 to a3, c3, knight c2 to e3. But here you can see that the knights are in contact pretty soon with key squares. But before we get into that, knight c6 has been seen in the game Kasparov against Sachs in Tilburg 1989. That game, for the record, went rook g1, Kasparov playing very, very aggressively with white. So this is a lot of pressure on the black position, and he even went for that h5, and he sacked that h5, and he got the rook crashing down there, and there's a lot of pressure on the black position, doubling rooks there, opening up, trying to open up the f file, and I think there's a tactical disaster coming up. Black is under great pressure. So knight h5 there, taking some squares around the king, and bishop h6 is going to be winning the queen after takes. I'll put this on the board. This was the finish, otherwise the king moves, take the knights, but here we're just going to win the queen. So yeah, Kasparov cracked through the opponent's defences there, but that is generally regarded as, this has been played before knight c6 here in this particular position. So e5 is a little bit surprising. So you can see after knight f5, this is a very nice position. Knight c6, end of book. So yeah, actually they didn't have too much choice here. Yeah, it wasn't the strategic decision of Stoofvlees. So which makes sense actually, because I think neural networks would generally avoid structural issues like that. Generally, they'd be able to sort of sense that. I think they're better on pawn structure management. So this is kind of a miserable position to be playing. Leela plays knight e3. This is a very, very sensible move. It does protect g4, puts the knights in contact with key strategic squares. Slight downside, you might argue, well, this knight can go to d4 and it's kind of a nuisance. It would have to be kicked away at some point, surely. So interesting position. Bishop c2 has been Bishop g2 has been seen before in the game Harry Krishna against Ivan Hu. That was in Weekend Z 2013. That ended in a win for black, actually. So that's another reference game there. So, but knight e3, very interesting move. Bishop e7. We have bishop d3, and now black doesn't really want to castle into castling into this storm, and plays actually knight h7. So this is a nifty looking move, trying to encourage h5. That would be the dream for black, which would probably give black at least an equal position. But Leela plays the dynamic g5. So h5 would just be giving up dart squares basically, and black could play strategically with bishop g5, try and weaken white on the dart squares, and should be well, at least better than the game. Black might even have a small edge here. That's a good use of the g5 square. That would be a terrible strategic mistake, basically. So g5, much more dynamic. Here is played. And that's and now we have hg. So you see the knight's pinned. This represents a pawn sack, and you might wonder, what is this about? Well, bishop e6 was played, not taking on g5. So what is that about when it's at home? Bishop takes g5. Let's examine it for a moment. Knight e5 is actually pretty powerful here. This nasty pin, the knights have got good access squares. Say bishop takes, queen takes, bishop e6. White essentially plays queen e3 and laughs at black. Black is in a great deal of pain and suffering here, actually, in this position, believe it or not. So say, as an example, queen a5, there's actually a really strong move here in the form of a3, saying to black, if you castle queenside, you're going to lose your queen. So king d7 is basically forced. Just to put that on the board, this is just an example. If castling b4, when does the queen go? You can see the power of that knight on d5, and it's a very dominating position. The queen's been trapped. And if king d7, of course, that's extremely miserable to have to play that here. So this is just is going to be better for white. Doesn't, you know, the pawn sacrifice is fully justified here. This gigantic knight on d5. So anyway, so it's ignored. The pawn sack is ignored with bishop e6, and now we have knight ed5. It's quite a dominating position here with these knights. They're kind of strangling black strategically, and yeah, there's a kind of there's a mistake here. Well, it's been labelled as a mistake by many, but it's a very difficult position for black. Black, believe it or not, played bishop takes g5. Before we get into that, you can see bishop takes and knight c7 is going to be winning the exchange. So very, very interesting, bishop takes g5. But before we get into that, if black plays knight d4, then f4 is good. For example, this position, bishop f1, hitting the knight. And white should end up with a very nice advantage here. This position, there's a good target here. White's got a good pressure. There's quite a bind. So that's difficult for black. And also, if we look at queen d7 for a moment, then bishop e3, this position is bishop takes a7. So black has to be wary about castling queenside when there's a big knight on d5. For example, like this. And so what does black do there? That's horrible. And if black doesn't castle queenside, well, it's a tricky position. So yeah, it's a difficult position. So let's have a look now. So bishop takes g5. So it's been regarded as a huge blunder. Bishop takes, queen takes. So what is Stoofvlees thinking here? Is it some major miscalculation? So Stoofvlees has had some brilliant results, even beating Stockfish on occasion. Why would it do this? Is this wild Anderson style? Ulf Anderson, one of the romantic era players, reckless kind of sacrifice for the kingside attack. Check, king e7, and Leela is a bit boring, takes the rook. Okay, we have queen g2, so very dashing play from black. What's the big danger here? Attacking the rook is also protecting f3, meaning knight d4 to f3 and bishop g4. These across the light squares look dangerous. Leela plays one of the very best moves, of course, here though, queen h5. If we look at alternatives in this position, if rook f1, then that's asking for knight g5, and you can see that the black pieces are really springing into action here with a vengeance. So for example, queen e2, knight d4, that's a total disaster. If the queen moves to d2, then there's knight f3 check, either knight to f3, ouch, a world of pain. So yeah, black can't be allowed to spring into action here. If king d2, then black can just get a potential attack if white's not going to find this key move, which is played. But if white finds it here, they can play it in a delayed fashion, still with the big advantage. But it was played immediately, and this is it's up to black to show compensation here. So there's a big mystery now. What is the compensation? Knight g5 is played. So offering the other rook. So this is a romantic era style game, both rooks being offered. We have got, it looks as though, this looks potentially quite dangerous, right? There's 4 attacking pieces, the king's still in the centre. So isn't it natural to sacrifice both rooks? Well, Leela is boring and does take this rook, asking, well, okay, prove it. Who would have thought this is an engine game? Who says engine games are boring? Not nowadays. Especially with Stoofvlees playing like this. Just sacrifice both rooks. Where's the attack? Knight f3 check. We see king d1. Queen takes f2. So there's a concrete threat of mate in 1. So guess what Leela plays here? It's a move which meets the requirements of the position, you could say. And the last time I said such a comment, it was like the only move in the position, actually. But yeah, this is probably one of the only moves in the position, but it is sufficient to meet the requirements here. I hope you can find it if I give you 5 seconds to pause the video. How would you parry this mate in 1? So 5 seconds, white to play, 500 points defensively. Okay. Make the romantic players cry after sacrificing both rooks with knight b1, a knight retreat, I would have thought. Okay, sometimes these knight retreats are difficult to calculate. So knight b1. And you could ask, where is the compensation here? Yeah, it's getting tricky. So at move 20, black played here knight b4. You might ask, instead of knight b4, what about just pointing at the king here with bishop g4? This looks pretty direct. What does white do in this position? Well, actually, there's actually a really good move here available. What would you play with white in this position? If I give you 5 seconds to pause the video. 200 points. White's play. Okay, queen takes g7. Yeah, just hitting that bishop. And it doesn't matter what black does here. It's worse. If knight g5 check to shield the bishop with discovered check. This isn't a problem of king c1. It seems. Queen e3 check. Knight d2. Knight b4. Knight c7. This knight's rerouting back to d5 with advantage. And here, even queen f8 is winning. The king, the black king, is actually worse than the white king. It goes into a forced checkmate here. And even if white didn't want to play that forced checkmate, this kind of position here, white can actually do well just with moving the rook. So, for example, e4 check, and then activate this rook with rook a3 coming up. So white's going to untangle the position and develop like that. So yeah, bishop g4 doesn't seem sufficient at all because of queen takes g7. If knight cd4, this is another attempt to make these pieces work really hard together. Again, knight c7, bishop g4. Again, there's knight d5 check here, actually, is best, probably. And then queen takes g7, so hitting that bishop. If knight h2 check, king c1, again, there's no attack, it seems. It's not very convincing. There's no follow-up. So yeah, I think Stoofvlees has overcooked this in the stew. Knight b4. It's not beef stew today. It's something else. It's undercooked. Attack. Knight c7 is played. So here, yeah, it's getting interesting here for sure. Black here played bishop g4. in this position. You might ask, hold on a sec, what about knight takes d3? On c takes, this position, queen e3 is interesting to consider, but check, knight takes e6, and white is really getting out of the checks eventually with big material advantage. If we look at this line again, on c takes d3, there is another question here about queen takes b2. On queen takes b2, yeah, it looks a little bit scary for that rook. This is a very chaotic looking position. White can play check, and here check again, and here knight takes e6 with a huge threat actually. I wonder if you can guess after queen takes a1 what white plays. Hope you can spot it. 100 points. Might want to pause the video. There's knight f8 checkmate. So the black king is in grave danger as well in many of these lines. So this queen takes b2, yeah. This knight takes e6, and if black has to waste time with f takes, then queen e7, giving up this rook, but yeah, white is checkmating here. White is a rook up as well as checkmate, so good stuff for white. So anyway, bishop g4 was played here. Now in this position, it's not queen takes g7, but queen e8 check, king f6, queen d8 check, king g6, queen takes d6 check, and this is picking up this knight, queen takes b4. So yeah, what's going on here? What has black got to show here? Queen g2, we have rook f1, a5, queen e7. It looks as though there's no attack after queen h2. It doesn't look very convincing. Knight e6. So white's actually creating threats now as well. We have knight d4 check, king c1. Bishop takes e6. So white has sacrificed a piece to gain some time here. Knight d2. You might wonder, if white didn't sacrifice a piece, what would happen? If king c1 check knight d2, white could sacrifice a piece like this actually, and with b3 still be better. This is another way of sacrificing back material, and it ends up with an advantage for white. Yeah, I mean, white's still an entire rook up, even after giving up a piece there in that line. So there are various ways to give back material. So this one was used. So knight d4, king c1, bishop takes. So gives white some breathing space. Knight d2, a4. We have b3, bishop h3. This is all a bit desperate and unconvincing right now. If black had tried a3, then c3, just nudging the knight to win the bishop. If the bishop goes there, then just take the knight, and it's loads of material up for white. Yeah, it's all over really, it seems. Bishop h3, king b2, queen takes d2, so offering that piece for this check, because here it's very difficult for the black king's safety. If the king moves to h5, then check, queen takes g7, so lots of mates threatened, and if check, these checks kind of run out, and if queen a5 instead, well, they run out, king b2, and if knight takes, yeah, just take here, and it's all winning. Yeah, there's hardly any checks there. So here we have bishop g2, rook ad1, queen f2, and now rook takes. Yep, still material up for white, so b takes, extinguishing any threats there. Now, okay, the rook's hit, that moves. It's a rook up. It is actually a rook up, as you can see. Queen takes there, allowing even the check, but it doesn't matter the kings getting out of them. And here it ended with a checkmate, this game. Yes, none of this plus 10 yet. Stoofvlees, I think there's something up with the evaluation, so that's why it just played to the end, Stoofvlees games. So yeah, that was a double rook sack by Stoofvlees. Very Ulf Anderson style romantic era chess. So who says these engine games are boring? They're not very boring at all. In fact, I think they're more interesting than a lot of over-the-board games by a long shot, quite often. So I hope you enjoyed it. You might want to invite me for a game indirectly. Just use kingscrusher.tv and register with that, and I'll invite you for a game shortly after. Or you can use bit.ly/chessmold. You can join me on Discord. There's a lot of TCECers and other people now. It's getting quite lively. kingscrusher.tv/discord if you follow that link. Okay. Thanks very much.